Hello again, my name's Alan. Thanks for joining me on my channel. As you can see in front of you, I have been busy, even though perhaps my content production has slipped recently. What I've been doing is a variety of little projects which I thought I'd bring you an update on today, and just perhaps introduce you to one of my new ventures, which will be as much as I can make it, a weekly podcast or a weekly update as to the projects I'm working on and progress, etc. More about that a little bit later on. But what have we got in front of us? Well, what we've got is my sort of workings at the moment on a Helms Deep game. Now, fantasy isn't one of my strong points, but I was inspired because part of my group that I game with are very much into their fantasy games. And I've decided to go back to something which is more akin to the Tolkien version rather than the Peter Jackson version. Let me just give you a bit of a picture as to what Tolkien actually drew. Hopefully you can see that there. What we've got is a main castle fortress, the deepening wall, sorry, and then this gorge effect, which was obviously to the rear, which was, I'm told, modelled on, or the inspiration for which came from Cheddar Gorge in the southwest of England. Mid-southwest anyway. Excuse me. So what I've tried to do is combine more of the theme, if you like, from Tolkien, but also allow me to pull together the elements that the LWTV guys actually put together for their game. So as you can see, we've got, it says hopefully that will come into focus. There we go. We've got the wall, a number of objective points. We've got the castle itself and the main fortification. So what it was important for me to do was to get the themes or the elements from both the Tolkien version and the scenario that we're trying to play here. So what I've done is and also what I wanted to do is make a modular section or a modular approach so that they were in sections. Now this looks pretty rough at the moment, but this is just, I wouldn't say the prototype, but this is me laying out all of the various elements to make sure they fit as a game and that I've got storage for it. So the only pain is going to be that big unit back here, or that big section back here, where I've got one main component. But as you can see, I've made out of mounting card, just for convenience, really, because I had it in the workshop or on the model bench. I'm going to create the river here, so that's all one self-contained item. There's a 10mm figure just sat on a base back there for scale so that I can keep an eye on what I'm doing and how it relates. I have started to paint my own figures, and hopefully I'll have a look at those a bit later. But let's have a quick look actually. So I'm quite pleased with how they're going at the moment. I've made them brighter than I would normally do. I may tone those down later on with a wash or something, but at the moment I always work on the basis that small scale figures need a little bit more oomph from your paint and palette choices. So this is a 10mm game. That section over there obviously is the main castle, the main fortification. I've got the deepening wall here, which obviously will have the culvert marked over there. But the important bit is, for me anyway, that this all comes apart as sections. So this here will be fixed, but you can see that I can slide the wall section out and thus releasing the rear section. So I'll end up with a wall section, the joining piece on the end, and the main castle itself, and that'll be the lot. This is all XPS foam or extruded polystyrene. This was just a convenient cardboard tube that I found, and all I've done is to cut the sections out with a cutting blade on a rotary tool. In my case, that's a Dremel. This has been done with a hot gun and then stuck on. This is, oh well, I should give a shout out. I've been using foam tack glue. Lots of other choices about how you can get this, but this works really well for foam. One of the other reasons I chose the mounting board is because it sticks really well to foam. And what I will do later on is I'll show you how I'm going to make this a little bit sturdier. But I've also been using some foam putty, which again works really, really well on this sort of terrain. Just giving you a little bit more of a heads up, what I've done here is to put some weighting down. Now it's not perfect, as you can see, and when I put a mix of PVA and paint over that, what I'll do is I'll do up to the edge, but I'll put some strong weights on here and I'll keep it on a very flat surface, and then hopefully that will deal with that problem. There's lots of other filling bits to do here, as you can see, but I just thought I'd give you an early heads up. This is going to be my project over the next couple of days, maybe a bit longer, depending on how much time I can get from work, etc. There's one element that I'm going to introduce that wasn't particularly clear in either Tolkien or any of the other games that I've seen, and that is to introduce, let's just go back to this map again. So for me, I'll be introducing a big hill over here, and that really is just to model the location of where Gandalf and the reinforcements, or the rescue, the relief force, comes in during the sort of sequence in the book. So my players don't know it yet, but that will be one of the, not random events, but towards the end of the game, we'll look at how quickly those relief forces do arrive, and maybe keep some of that hidden from the Uruk-hai player. Again, it's going to be good old XPF foam. So this is the section I bought. Now it just looks like a blue base, obviously. But what I've found is it's really easy just to, you can mark this out as well, or as as you like, with a sort of felt tip pen. Cut it with a hot gun, and I've just been using something that, to be quite honest, I picked up off Amazon. They come with a variety of tools, and this one is a hot knife, a hot prober, call that. And what I tend to do is go round at an angle, and it will cut fairly well, albeit a little bit slowly. And do take care when you're doing this, because it does get hot, obviously. But you end up with a very durable piece of terrain that's lightweight, and for me is easier to store because I can put it in a garage or a loft or whatever, and I don't have to worry about it going off due to damp. This terrain board here is actually not the terrain piece that this is going to be matched against. I've got what is sold as a World War II type background, which is much darker, which I think will suit the terrain piece itself. Hello, thanks for joining me on an update video for how I'm getting on with this castle project. As you can see, I've started to put some proper detailing on the actual sort of tower sections themselves. This I'm quite pleased with the effect. I don't know how that looks on the video, but all I've done is taken a simple card tube and some of this detailing paper. What I did, I think I spoke to you last time, I've sealed this with a bit of watered down PVA, then I've attached the sort of paper effect there, or the paper with that sort of stone effect. There's a couple of sections that I'm not entirely 100% happy with. I think if you look over to the right hand side there, where you'll see next to the pot, I've got a little wrinkle there, but I've decided to make that a bit of a feature, so I'm going to go over the outside of these tubes again with some watered down PVA, and if I just move some weights, I've had some wall section drying over here, as you can see, and again I've left the end pieces there to fit into the actual model so that it is transportable, and storage isn't as big of a problem. But anyway, I'm gonna paint over this with a bit of watered down PVA, hopefully trying to get it to look a little bit more consistent in terms of finish, but also just to give it a bit of protection. As I said, I'd like to leave this stored perhaps in an outbuilding or a garage or something similar, so that will just make it a lot more durable. Over on this side, if I just lift up the camera, I've started to put this sort of muddy colour you can see here was a watered down PVA with a little bit of burnt umber acrylic paint thrown in. I've sanded some of the sort of plaster sections or the filler sections. It is looking a lot better to the naked eye. And again, this is the sort of construction that I'm going for. That pale blue open or yet to be finished section that we've got here is just waiting for some foam board front, and then the two little dots there are where I've marked out the entrance point. So this is by no means my finest work, but this is something I've knocked up very, very quickly. And I can assure you that from sort of gaming distance, this looks a very creditable sort of piece at the moment. So as I said, the next stage is a bit of watered down PVA over everything. I'll just move this out of the way. I've put some of these weights on here. As you can see, I'm gonna start to double up a little bit more with the lead weight, and then again when I reseal that, hopefully that gives it a bit more rigidity and a bit more strength, and then I'll start filling out the model itself properly. And that's a little bit of an update. As soon as I can get this done, I can get my sort of painting table back and start to show you how I'm doing the actual figures for the game. See you shortly. Welcome back. Just a bit of an update as to where we are with the various components of the castle. Just moving back over there. I've glued a couple of extra pieces of foam around that sort of upper tower. They're going to be painted obviously stone. The idea is that the castle's sort of hewn into the rocks, as I've said before. The front here, we've actually got the end piece, and this is the, sorry, let me just go over here. This is that larger piece I said I was going to put on the side to simulate whether a Rohirrim sort of relief force comes in. This is the other piece of the sort of jigsaw puzzle, as it were. I'm a bit disappointed I've got this transition of colour there, which may or may not come out on the video, and you can see there a little bit of whitening which I need to deal with. You don't really see that with the naked eye. It's very much something that the camera's picking up, but obviously these constituent parts are all ready to go fitted together. What I'm going to do now is, this was the last piece I did, so again, normal sort of process, cutting around the foam, putting some filler on, then giving it a sand. Let's see if I can sort that out. It's getting quite a lot of glare off the lights, apologies for that. Let me just turn that around. This might help. But this has just been sanded pretty roughly, really, just to take the main edge bits off. We'll cover a lot of that over when we paint it and put some flock on. Let me just turn the light back again. But yeah, I mean, I probably shouldn't have done quite so much finishing here before getting involved in the actual painting. But what I'm going to do now is do this piece here on camera. This is the one that I haven't put any sort of PVA on. So I'll get my paint mixed up, quite a heavy sort of paint and PVA mix, mainly PVA and water rather than the paint. And then I'll get a sort of dusting colour like this, a bit thicker than that. And I'll put a second coat on this one and really then start to think about finishing. What I want to do is just make sure, and obviously you can't see it on camera, but if I use this one as an example, there's a couple of sections where I just would rather that was very solid, just for durability, as I've said, and hopefully we'll go from there. I'm just going to give you a quick heads up as to what the sort of mixture looks like for this first phase, the undercoating. There we go. Not particularly appetising, but that's obviously quite a bit of water, quite a bit of PVA. I've got some burnt umber acrylic paint in there, and this may not be quite thick enough, but this is sort of mix that I'm hoping to get. And what I'll do is I'll stir that up nicely, give it into a good sort of paste, and then when I'm ready to go, I'll show you again what it looks like. So that's only taken about a minute, but this is much more what I was looking for. It's still fairly runny, so there's still obviously quite a high proportion of water in there, but this will go on nicely, and it will start to sort of build up that strength and rigidity that I'm looking for. So let me just get this camera lined up for this guy. Apologies for that glare. But all we're going to do really is not too carefully place this over. And again, on this first coat, I'm really not looking to cover, you know, the underneath, as it were. This is all about that initial strengthening. The next coat that I put on will be designed to be more paint heavy or paint rich, and then we'll also look at how we can put some sand on or something to build it up. So that's very much the process for this one. This should take a little bit better on this one because it's obviously already had a very washy coat of PVA and water and a little mix of the acrylic paint put on. But anyway, I'm not going to bore you with it. I'm just going to carry on doing these two, well, sorry, the whole of the piece, and then let you know what it looks like. So pretty much all of it's done in this first sort of phase of basing. As you can see, I've left the channel for what will become the river, or the stream, around the fortification. Just a quick heads up, I'm going to do this base section here. So all I've done is off camera picked up some paint, and the only reason for showing you this, to be quite honest, is to say, you know, it will look a little bit wishy-washy when you've done it. You're probably not getting that impression in this one because this has had two coats, but I'm going to go round. In fact, look, you can see I've missed a section there with this smaller brush. I used a slightly larger one to do the initial coverage. I want to make sure that I've got into all of the nooks and crannies, as it were. But I just wanted you to see the fact that, you know, if yours turns out to be a little bit sort of watery in this first phase, that's absolutely fine. And obviously my problem here is that I've got a wall that I want to keep pretty much intact, certainly not mark too much with the paint. I don't mind going into a little bit because obviously I've left a little bit of room for manoeuvre there on the edge, but I really don't want to go too far up the wall. Now the paint I've used, sorry, the paper I've used will actually allow you to sort of wipe it off a bit later, because I sealed the paper with some PVA. If I need to adjust that, it's not too terrible, but given that I'm going to build up in front of it and put some flock, etc., or sand and flock, going up slightly up that wall line is not a problem. So I'll carry on, finish that off, let it dry, and then we'll pick it up tomorrow.